What to do with Donald Trump's conviction in New York in the case that centered around hush money payments to an adult film actress is now in the hands of a judge. Trump was convicted in May on 34 counts, but his sentencing has been delayed since he was reelected president. Trump's lawyers want the case dropped, citing a Supreme Court ruling granting presidents broad presidential immunity. New York prosecutors say that would be extreme and lay out several options for the judge to consider as alternatives. The Hill courts and legal reporter Zach Schonfeld is covering the story and joins us to discuss. Zach, thanks for coming on. You have an article out discussing the different options the judge has moving forward. What are they? And what is the judge going to have to consider as we move forward?
Hey, Drew. Well, if the president-elect gets his way, this case will be dismissed entirely. But prosecutors have been pushing back, instead laying out this week several alternative options that they say the judge has that they say would accommodate the fact that Donald Trump is headed back to the White House, while at the same time keeping intact that jury's verdict from the spring, finding him guilty of 34 felony counts. So the most straightforward alternative that they have said is that you could simply put a stay on the case that would halt the proceedings for the 4 years while Donald Trump is in the White House. But they also have some other options too. They told the judge he could treat it as if Trump had actually passed away. In those cases, the normal procedure would be to put a note in the case file saying that because that person had passed away, that the case can't continue. Prosecutors say the judge could do something similar, put something in the case file that says the jury's verdict came in, Donald Trump is no longer innocent, but he was never able to be sentenced or never able to exhaust his appellate options. But after that note goes in the case file, it would have the proceedings terminated. Alternatively, they gave another option and told the judge that he could move ahead towards sentencing before Trump is inaugurated on January 20th and impose a sentence that gives no punishment, no jail time, no fines, nothing at all, and end the case that way. So the judge really has a lot of options here at his disposal.
When should we, Zach, expect a decision on this?
It's really unclear at this point. I wish I had a better answer, but the judge could now rule any time. This last brief from prosecutors is the final brief that was expected, so the very next thing is this judge's ruling. And he's someone who we've seen at times issuing rulings very quickly, sometimes in a matter of hours, but other times we've really seen him take his time and sit on these decisions. So at this point, we just keep refreshing to see, when that ruling is going to hit our inbox. It could be any time, whether that's today or closer to the holidays.
One option that we're not discussing here is President Biden could pardon Trump. At least that's what Democratic Senator John Fetterman is calling for Biden to do. He says the prosecution of Trump in this particular case was political, said the same thing about Hunter Biden. Is there any world in which President Biden would actually consider that?
So President Biden in this case would not have the authority to pardon President-elect Trump because this is a state case. These are state charges. The president only has the power to pardon for federal offenses. Now, in theory, there's a way that Trump could be pardoned in this New York case by the New York Governor Kathy Hochul. But given the fact that she is a Democrat and all of that, I think it's pretty safe to say that Trump won't be getting pardoned in this case.
The fate of TikTok hangs in the balance as company lawyers try desperately to stop a ban on the app from going into effect on January 19th. This is the result of a law passed by Congress, signed by President Biden, that requires TikTok's parent company to sell. It comes as a result of alleged ties to the Chinese government. The big question, it seems, Zach, here is, will the Supreme Court intervene in this case before the app is taken off providers like Google and Apple?
Yeah, that is the million-dollar question. Will this law go into effect by January 19th that would require TikTok to either divest from its Chinese ownership or ban the platform from being used here in the United States? At this point, the proceedings are still taking place at the D.C. Circuit level, the Intermediate Appeals Court. TikTok is trying to get this law put on hold. If they fail there, the very next step will be going to the Supreme Court on its emergency docket and asking the justices to step in and delay this law until they can decide the case fully. So probably a lot more to come still between now and January 19th.
Speaking of the Supreme Court, justices declined to intervene to block this rule from the Biden administration that seeks to prevent toxic waste from shuttered coal plants from leaking into groundwater. What does the ruling mean now? What does this decision from the Supreme Court now mean for that rule?
This was another case that landed on the Supreme Court's emergency docket, not its normal docket where these cases take months to go through the process, there's full round of briefing and go to oral arguments. This is something that was just put on their emergency docket. And so the justices denied this, but they didn't provide any explanation, which is very common in these types of emergency applications. And what we've seen over the last year or so is the fossil fuel and energy industries bringing this series of challenges to various Biden administration rules to the Supreme Court. This one had to do with coal disposal, but we've seen plenty of other rules too with power plants and the like. So this is just the latest attempt by the industry to block the Biden administration's actions, but it turned up unsuccessful.
The person accused of accosting Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace pleaded not guilty yesterday to a misdemeanor assault charge. Mace says James McIntyre shook her hand aggressively, injuring her arm. Now, a witness tells The Hill that they saw it as a normal handshake and that this has been blown out of proportion. Is there any video surveillance of this or any video that maybe people in the room took that could get us some clarity about what actually happened?
It's very possible. I mean, this happened on Capitol grounds. After all, there are cameras everywhere. What we haven't seen any video yet, but we do know, I actually have the police report in my hand, and I'll just read you from it. The way the police report talks about this incident, they said it was an, quote, exaggerated, aggressive hand-shaking motion. So that's what the officers who actually went and investigated this incident said in the report, but this case is very much in its early stages, and we'll have to see what happens.
All right, before I let you go, I know that you are a big football fan. I want to talk about this announcement that's rocked the football world. Bill Belichick, 6-time Super Bowl winning head coach of the New England Patriots, is heading to coach college football at North Carolina. You know, one of the big challenges I think for him is going to be making this transition from the pro to college level. He's going to have to be recruiting college kids. He's 72 years old. These kids are much younger than he is. Has he shown the ability in the past to relate to somebody so much younger than himself? And do you think that could be a possible challenge for him in this new role?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll say as a member of Generation Z myself, it's going to be interesting to see how Belichick interacts with now going to a locker room of fellow Gen Zers. But meanwhile, I'm more focused on the professional league in the NFL. I'm a Commanders fan myself. So at this point, we've got a few weeks left. It's time to lock it in and get a spot in the playoffs.
All right, he'll be in the ACC with my Florida State Seminoles. So hopefully we can have a better season next year, and maybe we'll end up seeing him in the ACC championship game. Zach Schonfeld, thanks so much. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Drew.
The new Congress will begin work on January 3rd, just a couple of weeks before President-elect Trump's inauguration. Republicans will hold majorities in both the House and Senate. Last night, The Hill celebrated veteran and new members alike. The panelists traded advice, chatted about the current political environment, and discussed the biggest threat facing the 119th Congress next year.
If you could say in one word maybe what the biggest concern is or the biggest threat to Congress going into next year, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Primaries. No, I'm serious. There's 435 members of Congress, and 400 of them are worried about their primaries, not about their general. You're not going to, all of the problems with Congress are not, most of them are not inside the chamber, actually. You could keep the same 435 members of Congress and have a much healthier dynamic if you made it so that most members didn't have to worry about their left or their right flank and could worry about the median voter in their district.
For more on this conversation, head to thehill.com and click on the Events tab. President-elect Donald Trump ringing the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange Thursday morning. It comes alongside an announcement from Time magazine that Trump is their Person of the Year for 2024. The Hill's In the Know columnist Judy Kurtz joins us now to discuss. Tell us more all about it. Judy, I'm sorry. This is the second time that Donald Trump has been named Time Magazine's Person of the Year. The first time was after he won in 2016. A lot has happened between then. COVID, January 6th, the investigations. There were 4 criminal cases, 1 conviction. What do you think went into Time's decision to pick him again for this prestigious honor?
Yeah, well, we know it went to Time's decision because they released a whole reasoning behind the decision. And they said, listen, this was not a tough call this year. They said a lot of times it's a difficult choice on who to decide. It was a no-brainer for Time magazine to choose former President Trump this time around. He's reshaped the American politics. He's remade the Republican Party in his image. He's won re-election, a very hard-fought re-election bid, survived 2 assassination attempts. I think there was no question that he was going to be named Time's Person of the Year this time around.
It's almost like, who else could it be? What's been the reaction online and from other fans of this enterprise?
Well, it's no surprise that anytime you mention politics, particularly the former president, there is going to be some controversy. Critics are saying that, listen, we can't put a convicted felon as Time's Person of the Year. Other people accuse the media of sane-washing former President Trump, but his supporters are hailing the decision for this prominent title as Time's Person of the Year, saying there's no other choice.
Switching gears, you recently wrote this article about former President Bill Clinton. He's set to release another book alongside author James Patterson. This isn't their first endeavor together. What's the new project?
Yeah, the new project's called The First Gentleman. It's their 3rd book together, kind of an unlikely duo, a former president and a thriller writer in James Patterson. They're teaming up yet again. Their last book came out during COVID, and I talked to James Patterson about their writing process, and they actually had to do everything virtually for COVID. They've become really good friends throughout these writing processes. They give each other gag gifts. James Patterson actually said he was gifted by former President Clinton with Monopoly for Socialists for Christmas. So they like to rib each other a little bit, and I think they're going to have fun with this next book that's coming out in June.
George W. Bush is a painter, Clinton's a writer. Interesting hobbies for former presidents. Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson is set to make her debut on Broadway over the weekend. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, she's actually fulfilling a lifelong dream. On her Harvard application, when she applied to college, she said she wants to be the first Black female Supreme Court Justice to also appear on Broadway, and she's doing just that this weekend. On Saturday, she's going to appear in the Broadway show And Juliet. It's a walk-on role, one night only, so we won't get a chance to see her at multiple performances, but this is a dream come true for her. She said she had a lot of opportunities to appear on the Broadway stage once this kind of got out that this was her dream, and she wanted to choose the right one. So she chose it, and Juliet, she will be appearing this weekend.
Incredibly lofty and unique niche goals for somebody to have, and she's achieved both of them. So congratulations to her. Judy Kurtz, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Drew.
That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Drew Petrimoulx. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel, and come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.